and welcome back to the Smoke Pit. Veterans are taught very early that discipline matters, order matters, chain of command matters, because without those things, people die. But military service also teaches something very uncomfortable. Legality and morality are not always the same thing. Soldiers are expected to follow lawful orders, but we're also taught there are unlawful orders. And just following orders is not considered a complete moral defense. History is full of people that were once viewed as criminals, agitators, or threats to public order, who are now remembered as heroes. Rosa Parks broke the law. Harriet Tubman broke the law. Vietnam draft resistors broke federal law. And at the time, many Americans hated them for it. So tonight we're asking, when is breaking the law justified? And how should veterans think about civil disobedience, dissent, and moral responsibility in a democracy built on laws and institutions? And so tonight, I'm going to welcome our veterans to talk about this and our family members. First up, we have Rory.
What's up, y'all? Rory, 5051 Vets Comms Director, Army vet, Fayetteville, North Carolina area. Yeah, happy to be here.
Next up, I'm going to welcome Tom. He's from one of our partner organizations, and I'm going to let him explain that. Tom.
What's up, everybody? Tom, co-founder of Fight Against Fascism organization. Also, you all know that I work with About Face. Also, 5051 Vets. We have our own coalition also for March for Democracy. Come from Jersey, and I am a United States Army combat veteran, Iraq 2009.
Thanks, Tom, for being here. We have a civilian on our board because we understand the value of military families and how they are caretakers and their voices matter just as much as ours. So, Hannah, welcome.
Hey y'all, Hannah with 5051 Vets and Common Defense here in North Carolina. I'm really excited to get into the history of civil disobedience with y'all.
Thanks, Hannah. And next up, we have Brian, who is with Mass 5051.
Hey, everybody. My name is Brian. I'm with Mass. My main claim to fame is I'm an organizer, speechifier. I also do some writing. I now am one of the main writers on the Mass 5051 Substack.
Thanks, Brian. We're always welcome to have you. And next up, we have Steph, who's all-around badass.
Okay, well, hi. Thank you. So yes, I am excited to be here. I am a retired reservist and wanted to add, once I got high enough in rank, I tried to fight back as much as possible for all those poor guys that were much lower in rank. So civil disobedience, I'm excited to talk about. You got to be high enough in rank so you could try to talk back to them and try to get some shit straightened out.
Yeah, I feel it. It's always good leaders that fight back, right? And last up tonight is Carl. He is not only a member of us, he runs his own shit. He's one of our partner orgs. Carl, welcome and introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I am Carl, founder and CEO of Crambox Politics. My experience with civil disobedience, I would agree with Steph, like as soon as I got high enough in rank, and then especially once I decided to retire and decided I wasn't pursuing any more rank is when I really got into being the voice for the junior Marines. But outside of that, my experience in civil disobedience is limited to Washington, D.C., the movement that we just had. So I'm excited for this show because I'm excited to bring my personal experience and what I viewed of it beforehand and then talk about it as we understand it now.
That's why I think it's such a important and unique discussion within veterans about civil disobedience, right? And so I want to start off on some foundational figures. One of the foundational figures is Henry David Thoreau, who refused to pay taxes because he opposed slavery and the Mexican-American War. His argument was basically you don't get to separate yourself morally from what the system does if you continue to participate in it quietly. What makes that uncomfortable is that it shifts responsibility downward onto ordinary citizens. And so, what do you think about that? Like, we cannot continue to participate in things, outwardly if we actually morally oppose to it.
So I like Thoreau because what he's talking about is, he's very much in the Protestant tradition of keeping to your own ethics and keeping your own counsel. And he practiced that with his actions. And a lot of that informed a book that he wrote on civil disobedience that was read by Gandhi and was read by King. And so he's actually kind of one of the founding fathers of even the concept of civil disobedience comes out of Thoreau's work.
And that's a good point, right, Brian, is that he actually went to jail for that, for his actions. And then he did write a book, an entire book on civil disobedience and things like that. And so, I mean, I am of the theory, and me and Carl had talked about this offline, is I believe if a law is unjust, it deserves to be broken. You know, Thoreau tied into that, right? Is like we cannot continue to pay taxes if it's going to slavery and things of a moral, like moral objectivity. And so, at what point does obedience become complicity? Is a bigger question.
I mean, he was civilly disobedient.
I mean, I think that when you think about like military ethics, right? And it was wrestled with after World War II, right? Like Nuremberg established that just following orders is not enough by itself, that individuals still retain moral responsibility. And I think that that's what David Thoreau was getting at, is that you have an individual responsibility to your own morality. And, then we saw it play out in World War II in the Nuremberg trials of like just saying, hey, like I was following orders. You do have a moral and an ethical responsibility, even as military, to refuse unlawful orders.
Yeah, so there's a question in my mind then, maybe just to kind of throw it out there so we got something to chew on, because it's easy to say that you should disobey like illegal orders or you should disobey civilly. But even for people who are willing to disobey civilly, and I've been in some of those conversations where we talk about potentially what could be done, in that tradition, like where do you kind of draw the line of scrimmage on like cost, right? Because if you disobey a particular type of law, I mean, you're going to get arrested, like all kinds of things that happens. Like what's the kind of cost balance and the risk kind of profile, right, for doing a particular type of action? And now I'm new to this activism thing, as I mentioned before. So like I kind of don't know where that line is, and I haven't done any civil disobedience yet, right? That might change in the future. We don't know what the future is going to bring. And so what's the trigger? Like when do you go out there and do the thing?
I think if you look at history, right, like it's a personal choice, but like movement theory, like if we're going to talk about movement theory and like civil disobedience and where does that exactly fit in, right, is you do civil disobedience as an outward like action, right, against an unjust law. And what I mean by that is like the civil rights era when they were doing sit-ins at whites only cafes. During Vietnam, the people that did not register for the draft and then automatically were facing prison time. Right? How do we get there? And right now, we are seeing an uprising of civil disobedience across the country, not only by veterans, right? We're also seeing it by civilians. We saw it on May Day by the Sunrise Movement out in California. And so you do see a shift right now from just everyday protesting to more civil disobedient type actions. And I think that that is because our legislators are not listening. Right, endemically. Like we are showing up to town halls, we are showing up to Capitol buildings, and people are letting their voices be heard, and nothing is changing. And so, therefore, the shift is now we have to break laws. Right, is my opinion on it.
Yeah, so I would piggyback off of that. Right, it's not just that they're not listening to us because we're going to the town halls. They are actively engaged in efforts to remove us from the town halls when we do go to speak our minds. They're actively trying to limit our ability to communicate with them. So at that point, you have to say, okay, so what is the next best option? How do I get my voice heard by these people if they're going to use force to remove me from the legal ways in which I can use my voice? And that answer is, well, you're just going to have to arrest me. And you're going to have to keep arresting me until you hear what I have to say. And oh, by the way, you can't arrest all of us because at some point you're going to run into a maximum amount of people that you can hold in your jail cells. And you can try all you want. But if the population says, fuck no, guess what? It's over and you've got to listen. Wow,
I think
you've radicalized me, Katie. Like that's...
I know. Yes, I know. So
I was just saying it in chat.
So have you guys seen this happened last year, February last year? I had to look up the video. I wanted to get the exact date. But do you guys remember the former NFL punter Chris Cluey when he did the town hall? And so this was oriented around essentially they wanted to put some MAGA crap into like the town charter, and I don't even know the details of it. And he gave this long speech, and he was talking about, the great American tradition of civil disobedience. And then he got up and he laid like his entire body in the middle of like the town hall, and then they couldn't proceed because he was there, and the police had to escort him. And then, of course, he just goes limp. Right. And it was extra annoying because they have to put all this extra effort into it. And of course, that video went viral because you have this famous football player who's probably worth millions, like, picking a fight in a town hall over what is actually absolute bullshit that they shouldn't be doing. Right. And it was pretty powerful and effective. I actually didn't follow up, so I have no idea if they actually changed anything, but it just the demonstration is important because it encourages other people to also do it. Like each act of courage begets another act, begets another act. Like valor is multiplied through exercise. It is not depleted.
I think that it's a much more like powerful act, right, Brian, is like that just the defining act of civil disobedience in and of itself says something is you're going to get arrested, you're going in with that intention, and that it's an act of defiance. Right, whether it's one person, a group of people, but it's an escalation because of the lack of change, right? Is we're doing all of these things, we're following the Constitution, we're following the law. And I think for veterans, like we understand that tension more than most people because service teaches both obedience and accountability, right? Like that is beat into us. Obedience and accountability, especially to like policy and law. And then when nothing is being followed, it's like, hey, now y'all aren't following the law. I guess we can lay down in traffic and we can block roads. And, it's a great tactic to use, and it's been used throughout history. We were talking, Brian, before this started about the Boston Tea Party. Act of civil disobedience, throwing Boston tea into the harbor. You have a myriad of different types of civil disobedience that people need to be aware of too, right? It's not just the oil people blocking traffic. It's not just JCC blocking Trump Tower. There's a myriad of different types of civil disobedience.
We a Guido, like a good one civil disobedience that just happened that I'd like to just highlight is I don't know how to say his name, but Guido Reichstader. I probably butchered that like a motherfucker. He's a Marine, but he was a Marine or is a Marine and climbed the McDouglas Bridge in DC Friday and ran out of water Sunday and came down some point today. Like they fire truck brought him down, and he did that for protesting the war in Iran and AI perfiliation.
And that's my point, is that there's like a myriad of different ways to be civil disobedient, right? And that historically speaking on civil disobedience, all of the people that we know as actors of civil disobedience were not heroes at the time. They were not well liked, right? Like it was later in our history that they became like heroes of civil disobedience. And I think that is something that we all need to internalize.
I was going to say, just this past weekend, we went to a day-long conference locally here and learned more about the unionization and like the change of the tobacco workers and how Mount Olive Pickles are so heavily involved in like the like non-violent actions.
I mean, I think that non-direct, like direct actions, like non-violent direct actions do catch people's like attention, right? Is that we did one here in Jacksonville where they were like honking their horns around the courthouse to disrupt the courthouse proceedings. And like that's civil disobedience in and of itself, right? Like nobody got arrested, but it is disruptive. And that's what civil disobedience is on a baseline, is just disruptive action, right? To the status quo. I think the bigger question is like, why do we as a society celebrate past dissent while condemning present dissent? Right? Is we have a history of that. Is like we celebrate the Martin Luther Kings, the Malcolm X's, but then in today's society, when you see those people pop up, like we're like, oh, they're extremists, or like the other side calls us domestic terrorists. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think hi everyone. B, I'm super happy to be here. Like this is a topic I really dig, man. And it's something that I think it's really good to remind Americans of their heritage of, right? Because I think in the modern era, it still happens. People don't see it as frequently because the media doesn't necessarily want to show a bunch of people enacting CD, one. But two, it's not as prevalent as what it used to be, right? There's also two kind of dates that I want to call out that just happened, right? That are very pertinent to the topic. One, we just had May Day, right? And Hannah touched on this. When we talk about May Day and what it means to have the rights that we have gotten from the labor movement, we really need to understand what that cost, right? And what those rights are. The reason we have a weekend, the concept of an 8-hour workday, the reason we don't have children in mines, right? This is all due to our labor brothers and sisters that fought and died for this. And when we look at things like the Haymarket, prime example, we wouldn't have an 8-hour workday if it weren't for Haymarket. If we didn't see the Pinkertons come out in mass to slaughter our union brothers and sisters as a privatized police force for essentially the billionaire class, we wouldn't have what we have today. And we're regressing in society. And we must remember that these were hard won. Because they were hard won, we must remember that so we don't have to fight for those same rights again. The other date that I want to mention is May 5th, which also is the day that Bobby Sands died. Just for those that don't know, Bobby Sands, he was Irish Republican, not Republican as Americans think of it, but Irish Republican, believed in the union of the North and the South of Ireland and the end of British rule. He died on May 5th on a hunger strike in prison. Right. And this is a man that did a lot for the cause. Right. One of his kind of famous sayings was everyone can play a role. Old, young, strong, the sick, employed, unemployed. Everyone can play a role. Everyone can resist. Because what he understood, which was very ingrained within the, Irish Republican ethos, was that it took on a society wholesale, everyone, to rebel against an authoritative government, which that's what Britain was in the north of Ireland, to stop this oppression. That was the only way that was going to happen, right? We have to remember that here, because when we talk about Trump, yes, Trump sucks. He needs to go. I don't think anyone's going to argue on this call about that. I mean, I could be wrong. But I think most people are aligned on that. I think most people are also aligned with the fact that he's probably not long for this earth because he's old. Right? Just the fact of the matter. So what does that mean? It means that we're going to have to fight the billionaire class, right? The oligarchs, also the people behind the throne, the Stephen Millers of the world. These are the people we're going to have to challenge. These are very powerful people, right? The way that we do that is by engaging everyone within this fight of CD and also making those people realize, like Katie said, and I'll shut up after this, like Katie said, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, go to the rotunda and get arrested, which is badass if you do, right? I always, my hat's off to you. But it can also look like we're just not shopping at XYZ locations. We're not patronizing this business, right? We are, to somebody else mentioned it already, we're going to drive 20 miles an hour in a fleet of cars through the Boston Tunnel and over the bridge to make sure that no one's getting to work on a given day. These are the things that we do, right? These are things that can be done, that everyone can do. These are all acts of resistance.
So I'll add to not dates, but time periods. January 1917 is when the suffragette movement began picketing the White House. July 1917, some of those picketers got arrested for impeding traffic. Ironically, same charge that Katie, you got charged with when we were doing our protests up in DC. So, but women's suffrage would not have happened had we not had women standing up for their rights and saying, listen, if you're not going to get our rights past the legal way, we're going to make it a nuisance for you until you start to listen. And then when you start to listen, we're going to get this done. And it worked. Unfortunately, in the UK, it had to go to militant means, but it worked in the United States. And that civil disobedience won through and got women the right to vote. That's another one of those rights. Listen, folks, that's another one of those rights that's under attack today by members of the Trump circle. So yet again, it's important that those of us who have the wherewithal to say no more and enough is enough, it's important for us to do these things. It's important for us to violate the law in a peaceful manner in order to make the point heard and make our voices heard. Logan, I'll be honest with you, I personally don't think that boycotting companies is going to be good enough, just because there are people that are like, yeah, but what about the people that work there? And they make all kinds of excuses, or you're in an area where, like, for us, Walmart is a major shopping region in this area.
Yeah, look, when I think of boycotting, it's just one tool in the toolbox there, right? And to your point, when it comes to rural America, I know Walmart can be the only place sometimes to get food. Someone that comes from Oklahoma, it goes there once a year. I totally understand that. Yeah, I think we need multiple tactics, man. Diversity of tactics is what needs to be used, in my opinion, right? Make things very uncomfortable. Make society unlivable, right? For those that are in power, make it to where it can't function, right? Whatever that looks like. And I'm not going to argue, like, this isn't something I'm going to do on this call per se, but we talk about peaceful protest. We should be aware of what that means throughout periods of history. And we must challenge our own mindsets with what we've been acclimatized to when they say peaceful protest. Right, because we're very indulated with a capitalist mindset consistently, to where we hold property sacrosanct, or at least the destruction of property is seen as something that's inherently violent. Right, and it's not to say that there aren't in times where it can be. I'm sure, depending on what it is, like a hospital, right? That's fucking horrible, but. I mean, yeah, I'm going to end it there. I don't want to get into too much, but when we're talking about private holdings, what have you, it's a little different in my fucking opinion.
Yeah, so I wanted to just kind of speak briefly about the efficacy of boycotts, and I'm going to approach it from somebody who was a skeptic and now who is no longer a skeptic. So what's really, really interesting about boycotts is you actually don't need everybody to not do the thing. Let's say you're boycotting, Walmart. Let's say you're boycotting Target. There's a Target boycott going on right now. But the stock price tanked about 15%. Okay, they're now in the red on their profits, and the reason they're in the red on their profits is because their margins are so narrow that you actually take 15% of their customer base away, it destroys them. And right now, the activists, and they're in negotiation with activists right now over the DEI policy stuff, right? Like, the activists have them over a barrel because they can't be profitable until the activists get what they want. So I don't know what the state of those things are, but that's just one example of where, like, a boycott's really, really effective. It's almost like, because the capitalist system is so highly leveraged, you can actually unwind that leverage through a simple boycott. You bring their level down 10%, and that's enough to do serious damage to a lot of really wealthy people. I think, who knows?
I mean, to me, undoubtedly, that was a contributing factor, right? Like, his corporate board at Tesla. I mean, you can read about it in
That's true. That's true.
in Business
the board.
Insider, right? His board was hitting him up at Tesla saying, quit fucking playing games, bro. Get back to work, right? Look at our stock price, right? So, I mean, it's something they understand. They understand money, right?
There's another example I haven't heard anybody say. It's the Avelo flights. And so, I mean, I watched Rachel Maddow and the MS Now, and they've been following ever since Avelo started actually taking the flights for the ICE deportations. And so the locals found out, because Avelo is only in certain towns, and it's a fairly small airline. And so these small towns, the locals started protesting and then started going to town halls. City council started pulling all the stuff related to Avelo because of the protests. And then Avelo finally stopped doing the ICE deportations for the government. That's actionable, peaceful protesting that actually made some change.
I don't know if I'd say it's 100% peaceful CD, but it's not surprising. It's like, no shit. Like, it's one of those things. It's like, you knew it was going to happen. Everybody said it to you, bro. And so then your response is, 100%. Yeah, the economic pressure there is real. Like, we're about to feel that, by the way. But yeah, I mean, look, I mean, it's one of those things where, I mean, it's funny because our response is, you can't shut it down. We're shutting it down, right? And it's like, fucking idiots. But then the other thing is going to be interesting is I think the last shipment of oil to the U.S. happened like 4 days ago from the Middle East, something like that. We're about to see something significant. It's going to get interesting.
Well, we're not going to run out because we actually make enough oil to do ourselves. Okay. But it is going to drive the price up because it's a globally traded commodity. We're not going to run out of oil. There won't be like a lack of gas. It's just going to cost more because foreign buyers are going to buy it up and then we're going to have less here.
With that part, like one of the things that is not talked about enough is fertilizer and fertilizer byproducts that come out of the oil production process. And that is centered in that same region. So we're going to see the price of food go up, which is going to really hurt Americans' pockets, but people around the world. But back to the topic, the entire LGBTQ movement has been nothing but civil disobedience. I mean, you could even call my time of service under Don't Ask, Don't Tell a form of civil disobedience because I knew going in that I was gay. And I knew going in that it was not allowed to be, it was not out and open. And I chose to serve regardless of what the policy was. So you could even call that an act of civil disobedience. But if you look at the entire history of the LGBTQ movement, it is littered with acts of civil disobedience. The Stonewall riots, acts of civil disobedience. And I might say to all the naysayers out there that, hey, guess what? The transgender community led that effort. And so they deserve that recognition as well. But you watch American history, and if you watch the way that the social movements have moved through the process, civil disobedience is the key to making policy changes. To those of us or those of the audience who are of the conservative nature, everyone remembers when Prohibition got put into effect. Well, the whiskey runners and I forgot the name, the bars that were hidden. I forgot the name of those or what they were called. But those were forms of civil disobedience.
Speakeasy.
Say again? Speakeasies. Those were forms of civil disobedience, right? It's in our history. It's our blood. It's the way that we work. It's one of the ways that we get our politicians to understand that they work for us, goddammit. They don't work for the major corporations. They don't work it for anyone else. They work for us. And if we have to break laws to get them to understand that, then that's the way that we do that. Holy shit, I'm radicalized.
Yeah, the speakeasies too are a particularly interesting example because essentially what they were is they were underground nightclubs. This also dovetailed into the suffragette movement too, which is how history is strange. So you essentially had women who were pushing to get the right to vote. One of their top issues, actually, for a lot of them, because they were Christian women, was actually banning alcohol. And the reason they wanted to do that was because their husbands would go out and get like shit-faced drunk and then come home a lunatic. And they were like, we're done with this. And so they wanted to end it. So then the speakeasies happened. But what the speakeasy was actually was kind of like an early version of the nightclub. And the men would actually bring their wives. And so then all of a sudden there wasn't any interest in prohibition anymore because you had everybody going to the speakeasy and it's okay. Why don't we just make this public? Why is this illegal in the first place? Right. And so it's just history's strange like that, where you get these kind of, contradictions that kind of add up until there's a resolution.
I do find it very interesting when because we were talking about prohibition and I saw Rory kind of want to step in there, but you see this like weird shift of like the appellation, right? Like the traditional like runners of liquor that have become like bootlickers. And it's like so strange of like these people whose like history is running illegal alcohol and making grain alcohol, who are now all about the federal government trampling all over their fucking rights. And it's like, what happened to y'all? Because like your history definitely shows that you're not fans of the federal government. You are not fans of local government. You are not fans of government in general. And now you're shoving an entire boot in your mouth while normal everyday people who haven't ever fought the federal government, like Carl, who's been fucking radicalized by yours truly, is now fighting back against the federal government. And I think that history is lost.
Your great granddaddy was not a fucking bootlegger for you to be a fucking bootlicker. God damn it.
So quiz time. I got a quote. I pulled it up for my research tonight and it came up and I thought it was interesting. I'm going to surface it now. The government is best which governs least. Who said that?
Thoreau.
Thoreau, right? And so you see that tradition, like the conservative tradition, actually in some ways spawned this idea of civil disobedience, fighting for your rights and for your liberty. It's that instinct of like, don't trust the man, right? That has been just warped by like the strangeness of history, right?
Yeah, but explain that, right? Like the conservative effort is to limit the size of government. And yet we have all these pretend conservatives who are running around wanting the government to control every aspect of our fucking life. Who
Well,
we believe in, whether or not women can get abortions, whether or not women should be able to have access to prenatal care, whether or not women should have the ability to vote. Like the government, they're pro-government as long as the government is telling everyone how to live, and as long as that way to live is in line with what they believe and think that it should be. Like the conservative movement that thinks that they're conservatives under Trump, that's not fucking conservative. Like that is theocratic, if not full on authoritarian. Like it's complete bullshit. And they don't fucking see it. They don't understand that when they say that they're for small government and then turn around and support individuals who want to use government to inflict their own opinions on everyone else, what kind of horse manure is that?
no, I mean, Sam brought this up the last time, right? Moral decay, right? Like they don't believe in anything really. It's more about, well, you make the people that I hate angry, and so good, fuck you. Like that's really the energy there. And like I still think a lot of folk, even in the movement, are not really wrapping their heads around like how much this entire thing is not driven by a philosophy and it's being driven by hatred. And all the people who were driven by philosophy, like myself, I do happen to believe in small limited government, right? Because then it's less likely you vote for a tyrant who's going to destroy your life, right? Or if you do vote for a tyrant, he's contained because there's constitutional boundaries. And all that's eroded. And now we're looking at a tyrant.
I don't know how many of you guys may know, but it's the Women's Day Off, Women's Day Off in Iceland. Not sure if any of you have heard of it. It happened October 24th, 1975. And what the purpose was that women were protesting because they were earning 40% less than men on average and a general devaluation of the work. And so there was a mass exodus of women that just walked out. And it was majority of the country. It was very widespread. And they were able to actually settle everything within some time. And right now, Iceland is the most gender equal country in the world because of that civil disobedience of that day. So it's, to me, that one is the highest thing that people try to strive for in this modern times for civil disobedience is that level. And when we were watching what was going on in Minnesota for when everybody walked out and did that whole day off and walking through Minneapolis, that's what I was thinking of, was that they were following those women that was doing that.
And I mean, to tie it all together, like, because we're talking about boycotts and white supremacy and everything, and to tie it together, right? Like, look at the bus boycotts, right? Like, active civil disobedience led by people of color that lasted. I don't think people like really realize how long the boycott lasted to get policy shifted. It was not like a very short period of time. These people like did this for 18 months before policy shifted. And when you think of the civil rights era, because Tom's point to white supremacy matters, right? And that the BIPOC led organizations of the time were like leading the civil disobedience of sit-ins of, like I live in Jacksonville and I was talking to everybody here, for everybody watching, we talk about these before we do them. It's not just a shit show. And I was trying to get a local legend on here and Rodney Hurst, right? Like his Axe Handle Saturday here in Jacksonville, it was like a very big deal because there is a lot of civil disobedience that has to happen throughout history for what we want today, right? Like it's not just protesting. It's not just, following the law. It's not just being obedient to the culture. Like for cultures to shift, we have to do like break laws and block roads. And we were talking about oil earlier. Like, they've done a great job of civil disobedience. Like, I know the European Autobahn people hate the oil industry folks that do all the civil disobedient actions because they'll like block the Autobahn for like hours and people want to run them over. But it gets the visibility, and that is what is needed, right? Is the visibility, and civil disobedience is what gets there. And I'm super proud of my radicalization of Carl, right? Like, I sent him a meme yesterday as a joke about gay people, right? About gay people advertising that's sent to gay people, and it's like gay people and rainbows. And then the other picture I sent was like gay people I know, and it was people with Molotovs in their hands, right? And it's just like there's a definitive difference of like how people think and what reality is. And the reality is within our community, right? The veteran community endemically is all about civil disobedience, right? We always have been. Like, veterans always have been, especially when you look back after World War I, World War II, and like, especially those two wars, when we had Black veterans come back and get fucking lynched. Right. And we don't talk about that enough as military members. Like, we don't talk about like our brothers and sisters getting lynched after they came home, and then military members speaking out against that practice. And in Vietnam, how there was a practice to send Black soldiers to the front line first, and there was a fucking Supreme Court case that had to happen for that practice to stop. And it took Black soldiers and white soldiers to stop the practice through civil disobedience and not following lawful orders. When they were sending Black people to the front lines of Vietnam to be fucking slaughtered, there was plenty of white officers that refused the order and got fucking court-martialed. And then it ended up in the Supreme Court. And so you have to think about like the culture at the time. And I love that we're talking about this, and I'm gonna shut up and let Brian talk, because there is a like need for it, and veterans are good at it, right? Like, DC was fun, right? Like, but like it was planned. Civil disobedience is planned endemically, very specifically. Like Rosa Parks, handpicked for that, and people don't talk about that. She was handpicked for that role.
I had the opportunity to get trained by someone who was involved in the LGBTQ movement, but one of her, I won't say her name, but one of her most recent claims to fame was that she was also involved in the Standing Rock protests. And what she does is she does nonviolent civil disobedience training for people in the area. So she brings in like 5051 and Indivisibles and all these different groups. A lot of us who are brand new to this thing, who don't understand how all this works, and kind of explaining the tactics and strategy and all that. So that was just worth raising. But one thing too to keep in mind, like with the Rosa Parks example, because everybody talks about the Rosa Parks, what people don't appreciate is there was something like a 3-year period of training and a planning and sequencing of a very, very specific and detailed campaign. The Birmingham bus boycotts, the reason they were effective is because they built a mutual aid network, and then they were able to kind of basically wrap their hands around the throat around the bus company and basically demand compliance, right? It's this idea of like using points of leverage to make demands, so it's not just like, blocking a road and being annoying for a day. Like when you're trying to do civil disobedience, it's part of a much larger campaign that has sort of onion layers around it. So you have a lobbying layer, you have a media layer, you have all these other components, which the movement is building out slowly but surely, which support that action. The civil disobedience is the tip of the spear. It makes the most noise and it draws the attention. But then you have an army of all these other people who fall in behind it to kind of make sure that it happens, with boycotts, with lobbying actions, with, lawyers going out and fighting it out, veterans standing in formation and in sort of awkward places to make people really reflect on what is really going on. I think all of that is important.
Okay. Hey, Mike, Sod, yes. Okay, so wanted to point out for the Vietnam War one for everybody, one of the court cases, and one of the officers that was actually telling African Americans, hey, you might not want to go to war. You could try to, you want to save your lives, don't go. Trying to disencourage. It was actually a Dr. Howard Levy, and he actually he went all the way up to a Supreme Court case, Parker v. Levy, which unfortunately did actually limit freedom of speech for military members when it came to him actually doing that civil disobedience. Not many people may know about that Supreme Court case, but he was just out there trying to tell these guys, try to save your lives, refuse to serve in Vietnam because they were being discriminated against and denied their freedom in the United States. That one I do recommend a lot of people to read and try to figure out, try to understand more of what was happening in that time framing for that doctor.
I do think it's interesting, though, like when you look at the Freedom Index and then you look at how they protest, and I think Logan was getting at this earlier about like other countries and how they practice civil disobedience, right? Like I always say that we have a lot of lessons to learn from the French, right? Like the French know how to party. Like, you piss the French off and they are like lighting their country on fire and nobody is going to work.
About the French.
Right. And I think that we have this culture, and we were talking about it earlier, and I read the comment of like talking about property, right? Destruction of property. I read the comments and I thought, like, yeah, it is a radical thought about like our laws around property, right? And Logan didn't want to go too far left, and I'm going to like take it way far left for 2 seconds. Because when we think about what they do in France and in other countries, like I'm not even just talking about the French, like look at the Bulgarians, look at the, the Slavic countries when they like they party. I mean, and it's not even them. Look at Nepal, right? The best thing about Nepal's government falling was the video I saw of a tour bus going through. They stopped burning down the government buildings, were waving at the tourists and were saying, sorry, come back next time. And then the following day, everybody got out on the streets and swept up the building they just burnt to the ground. And we don't think that way, right? As I know before I was like super radicalized, like I used to think like that of like, oh man, we probably shouldn't burn buildings to the ground. It's like really bad for capitalism. That's the problem. It's really bad for capitalism. And then I got like somewhat thinking of like, if we're going to do crazy shit, like let's burn down federal buildings. We all fucking pay for them. Like that's our tax money, and like when you look at the French who do this type of stuff, or then Nepal, or people that do that type of like way far things outside of our purviews and thought processes, it works, right? Like we just have a weird view of property here. It's very strange.
Which country was it that spewed manure on the sides of the government buildings?
The French.
It was France.
Yes, that's why I'm like, okay, I was trying to remember. I thought it was France.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll give you that we got probably maybe a little bit of a slightly out of step culture there. But when I talk to the Europeans about what we're doing, and I got friends over there, and I've mentioned this before, but just for any other new viewers, like they're mighty impressed with just the size and scale of American resistance, like writ large, because it took like, in the Slavic countries, it took them like 8 years for the color revolutions for them to build those things up and get to kind of like where we are now in terms of shape and scale and size. So like if there's a real, so they were like, I think the backlash effect against Trump was just so massive to the point that we got grandmothers and software engineers out there in the streets. It's not like, it's not the radicals who are out there. It's like the middle-class professionals and the lawyers and the grandmothers who are kind of doing the thing now. And that's good, right? It also means that we need some training because we're not as fighty as we could be, right? Because most of us have basically benefited from the society we're embedded in.
I want everybody who's watching and sitting here during BLM. All right, I was out in the streets. I'm sure a few of us on this panel were out in the streets getting our fucking asses handed to us by the police. There was one people that were doing it correctly in this country, and I love the video of it. The Puerto Ricans. The Puerto Ricans literally built a like 50-foot guillotine and carried it through their streets and erected it at their governor's mansion. And that human being fucking resigned. So when we talk about resistance in this country, it is doable. We just have to,
It's
like, I
doable,
know
it's not
Steph's
like
like,
that.
holy shit.
No, I'm drawing comparisons to January 6th because of the lynching,
amazing.
Station that was built in front of Capitol. That's my face.
Right? Like, but,
Yes,
and
I
there
had a
is that
few of them.
comparability, and it's weird. But when we think about like civil disobedient actions, we have to think of small scale, right? Of like, hey, getting arrested in rotundas. But like, there's also the large scale disobedience of like what Logan was talking about of like, we are shutting down bridges by driving very slowly in unison. And we are like disrupting commerce because it is all of us versus billionaires. And how do we affect billionaires is in their pockets? How do we affect their pockets is through commerce, right? And when we're talking about the French, it's like, yeah, the farmers spewed manure all over the buildings, but they shut down commerce. When we're talking about shutting, like the oil human beings shutting down the Autobahn, they're shutting down commerce. Like, because that is the bottom line on civil disobedient actions, is that it should disrupt commerce and everyday activities. And even the rotunda action we were a part of, it disrupted everyday activities. When you have veterans in there with a fucking bugle in unison, right? Like, it is disrupting everybody's day, and they're going to stop what they're doing, right? And there is a difference between peaceful civil disobedience and unpeaceful, right? So January 6th, like, fuck those guys, like, outright, right? Like, all of us are fuck those guys. A lot of those guys were veterans. We disavow them. They don't understand their oath to the Constitution, and fuck them. Like, we hope they all end up back in prison, and they're getting there fucking slowly by showing them their true selves. However, right, like, what we're talking about here on a civil disobedience scale is peaceful, right? We're not talking about like, let's like build guillotines and show up and kill people. It's not that. That is not civil disobedience. It is peaceful. It is disruptive to commerce. It is well thought out. It is planned. There is an end result, and there is a way to do it, right? There is a safe way to do it. And even during like civil rights, those like people knew they were going to get bit by dogs. They knew it and they took it. That's part of it, is understanding your threshold of what you can take. Is like, if you are not that human that can take getting bit by dogs and beat by cops, because that's a potential, probably don't show up for civil disobedience actions. Like, if you like want to get ripped out of a meeting and you understand that that's probably what's going to happen, is go into it with that mindset, but please get trained. Please keep it peaceful. I mean, even the Marine that got his arm broken, I'm sure he didn't think going in there of disrupting that hearing that he was going to get drug out. He did know that. He didn't know that his arm was going to get caught in a door. A sitting U.S. fucking congressman was going to come down and then break his fucking arm. I don't think that that was in the plan, but that's what happened. And so you have to plan for things like that, right? The J6ers that showed up to the Capitol, they are not fucking peaceful individuals. Like, they were there to overthrow the federal government, and like, that's not up for debate here. Is like, there are a lot of people that do civil disobedient actions, such as the flotillas, right? We didn't even get into like a myriad of different civil disobedient actions, including the flotillas that have continually went to Gaza to provide aid, and they're like getting bombed, beat, put in prison. All of that stuff it's just the threshold, right? For everybody watching is going to find it weird unless you're a veteran or you've seen one of our shows. Logan's already laughing. So we do something, we close out with a safety brief. A safety brief is something very endemic to the military. So on Fridays at close of business, your leadership gives you a briefing on how to not be a degenerate over the weekend. And so there is Pete, the penguin. All right, so we always start out the same way, right? Do not beat your spouse, your child, or your pet. Eat an actual meal. Gas station snacks, nicotine, and caffeine are not nutrition. Drink water like you mean it. Half of your bad mood is dehydration. Get some sleep. Nothing good happens after 2 a.m. except Waffle House and regret. If you've been running hard for weeks, rest is not weakness, it's maintenance. Take all of your meds, all of them, and make all of your appointments. Check on your friends, especially the ones that say I'm fine way too fast. If your mind's getting dark, talk to somebody. You can reach out to our page. You can reach out to a myriad of veteran pages. I'm sure every single one of our social media people would love to talk to you and make sure you're good. Isolation is where problems multiply. So call somebody and show up somewhere, right? If you're struggling, ask for help. It's not weakness. It's grown-ass behavior. Nobody fights alone. Schedule your appointments you've been avoiding and do self-checks, right? Breast cancer doesn't care how busy you are. Our vice president is currently going through breast cancer, so please do self-checks. If something feels wrong, get it looked at. Walking it off has ruined enough people already in our community. Stretch, you're not 22 anymore, no matter what you think. Sunscreen is cheaper than dermatology. Although if you're 100%, dermatology is free, but that's not the point. Put your dog on a leash. Your friendly dog is probably not friendly to other dogs. And we have someone on the call whose pet was killed by a dog. Yeah. Scooters are not transportation. They're not cavalry mounts. When veterans get together, probably don't take scooters. Always participate in barter systems involving coffee grounds, marijuana plants, and watermelon plants. If you find the plant later on the sidewalk and immediately claim it, that's raccoon logic. And we support this behavior 100%. Emotional support potatoes are authorized and should be carried with dignity and pride. Make good decisions. If unable, make survivable ones. If neither is possible, make legendary decisions and send us the videos with plausible deniability attached. Check on your people. And most importantly, protect the most vulnerable around you. As veterans, we took an oath to the Constitution, but we also took an oath to the people of this country, right? And a lot of civilians around us watching this are probably scared. And as veterans, we have a duty to those people around us to protect them, because we, as veterans on this call, are also unsure of where this is all going to end up. But we are trained and we are, able to protect people. And we took an oath to do that. So make sure that you're maintaining your oath. All right. Well, we do this every Wednesday and Saturday night. We hope to see you back. It's at 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern here on the Smoke Pit, panel of veterans talking about real issues. We hope you have a good night.